The Dangote refinery on Wednesday announced that it has reduced the price of petrol to retailers from 865 naira per litre to 835 naira. The company's group chief branding and communications officer Anthony Chejina in a statement said the price adjustment will take effect from April 16. This, according to him, marks the second price reduction within a week. We already have standing by to have this conversation with us, the Executive Director, Lead Network Africa, Chukwuma Ephraim Okenwa. Good evening, CEO.
Yeah, good evening. Yeah, can you hear me? Hello, good evening.
All right, thank you very much for joining us, CEO.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Let's go on right away. This is not the first time that Dangote's petrol pricing is adjusted, either downwards or upwards. What is happening now? Is there a reason it is happening, and what should we really expect?
What I would say, which is, has been quite instructive, is the very fact that Dangote Group has been keen at showing us two things. First, the importance of the long-awaited deregulation of the oil sector and its attendant benefits, where key players could have the initiative to influence the price, the pump price, in their only two ways, and by so doing, also help to alleviate the suffering of the masses. And we've seen over the time that aside from the fact that empirically speaking, Dangote's product is the best in the market empirically, based on facts available before the laboratory. The second thing is that we've seen more like an action reaction, a capture recapture method, where he makes a progressive move and there is a market response trying to even over the time for the very first time, having like a platform that could dare to sell fuel cheaper than NMPC. And we've also seen them respond thereafter. So I think that's a commendable move. And when such thing happens, generally it's going to affect the rate of inflation and other attendant things that are tied to inflation would also begin to respond to those indices.
The prices of petrol, it keeps coming down. And to the best of my knowledge, this is not really affected in our transportation system. And why is that so?
So basically, when you have such kind of changes, which in some cases could be temporary, so key stakeholders in the transport sector would want to watch with keen interest to see if the curve, the decline in the curve is going to be sustainable or something that is short-lived. Because if they just jump into the offer and adjust the price, and it does happen that after 1 week, the price is reverted to what it used to be, then that would mean that the progress is not sustainable. But then the simple truth of the matter, like we've seen, when pump price sold for 1,200 and something naira, and now, like I said, the last count I checked in Enugu, it's about 940, even though the moving cost from Dangote refinery is about 100 naira less than that. But of course, we know that other market forces, such as moving the PMS from the depots to the end users, also come into play. But how be it, we've seen the cost of transportation now is not the same like when a liter of fuel sold for over 1,200. So the process, the progress, is witnessed progress. I mean, with time, we'll begin to see that affected in the cost that the end users they pay.
recently when the issue of Naira to crude was raised, we were expecting that it's also going to affect the prices. Perhaps that's what's happening now, and it's going to cut across board. You know that not all the marketers now lift their petrol for one, from Dangote refineries right now. So is it going to cut across board, or do we just have to have that of Dangote alone? I mean, I know this question is
Well, Dangote,
two-way.
yeah. I understand. Of course, before now, we've seen oil marketers and even the government in some regard accuse Dangote of attempting monopoly, where only him can, be in charge of the market, considering that, as at the last count, even though government has made some investments to restart our moribund and minimally functional refineries to begin to function optimally. But that has not happened yet. The government keeps accusing. But we know that when it comes to the oil, considering that at the moment we have a monolithic economy where our economy largely depends on the oil. And so what you now have is that there are a lot of interest, including those that allegedly have refineries beyond the shores of the country. So whatever policy like swapping oil with Naira and then trying to restrict importation to a local producer would now mean that if some of the discrepancies that has been reported in the oil sector, such as maybe when you have like a certain volume of imported oil reported, differing from what was actually delivered, meaning that when you have like a situation where certain tons of oil is quoted far less, right? Is supplied than what is quoted. Then government pays subsidy on all of those things, and we are losing like a lot. Like I remember when it was the CGS that made a disclosure that actually the fuel that is quoted, like we almost like spend only just 2/3 of it, meaning that 1/3 of it, of the monies that are paid in subsidy makes it into the private pocket. So if that disclosure made by the CGS is something to go by, the controller of customs at that point, and then that means it's something that it's not going to come by easy by either to the citizens or to the Dangote group who wants to, make things better for the citizen. You are going to have like key stakeholders in that sector who have long benefited, from the old system. They are going to rise to protect their business interests, sadly against the interest of the masses.
CEO, you previously said that it's quite a Herculean task for transporters to immediately effect change in transportation costs as soon as there's an adjustment to pump price of petrol. If there is a downward review of the pricing, where do you think it will be reflected? I mean, if there's a downward review and the masses are not having a feel, it's baseless. So where are we expected to have a short-term benefit the moment that there's a cut down on the price of petroleum products?
So basically for SMEs, who would in many kind of ways have to power their businesses with fuel, considering that at the moment, we don't generate and transmit as much as businesses and household need. And citizens have ab initio played a critical role in powering their businesses. So the immediate benefit will be for household involved in business who will have to pay not just high for electricity tariff, but for energy. We'll now discover that practically you now have to pay less. And then also for those that senior civil servants who have the luxury of a car to drive themselves to office, You would also discover that you now have to spend less, powering your vehicle to move around, making the necessary moves with your vehicle. So it has immediate benefit. But then for those of them that are largely into business and understand that some of these changes might just be immediate policy response and might not be sustainable, they would want to watch closely with one eye. Is this going to be sustainable? Is here a change we can believe in? Or is it going to go back to, because I mean, citizens have every cause to look at some policies as, whether it's going to be sustainable or not. And interestingly, there has been this maxim, axiom within Nigeria space that nothing ever comes down in Nigeria, it keeps going up. But I think the likes of Dangote and sometimes also the dollar to naira tends to prove that that is not entirely true, right? For that to happen, all things certainly has to be equal, which in many cases may not be obtainable.
In all of this, how much influence does the regulatory body still have in terms of pricing of petrol?
Yeah, so the regulatory body, of course, in all honesty, by the virtue of the new act, the Petroleum Industry Act, right? Which is meant to reform the sector, ideally should have less regulatory powers and more of like a sector that is decentralized, filled with competition, and that will enhance transparency, customer satisfaction, and of course, people can now begin to gravitate to where they have, right? The idea of deregulation is actually to achieve some of the gains we've had in telecoms. Like when some of these big telecom companies started, to get a SIM card then was up to 24,000. When it was deregulated, I mean, so many of them could, even if you give 1,000 to get a SIM card, you still get 1,000 value of the recharge card. Meaning at some point it was 0 naira, at some point it was 100 naira. And so the deregulation would mean that a Dangote on his own now can say, even against the recommended price, right? Of the agency that is in charge of, price regulation, could say, well, we think we can offer this lesser. And I can tell you, with the body language of a Dangote, supposing the government remains consistent, which we've seen NNPC say they are not going to agree to that again. Everybody should buy crude oil in dollars, right? Even though you are within Nigeria, which I don't think it's fair to the naira, because one of the ways you can strengthen your currency is not only to patronize your currency within your country, but also to insist that everyone doing business on Nigeria soil must use Nigeria dollars. Sometimes in time past, we've seen some flight companies who reject the naira. You must bring dollar to buy flight tickets. And we had a government that played blind eye to that. Unfortunately, you can't even think of such in, nations that think their currency worth something, right? You can't imagine a situation where you want to do something, you want to pay for hotel, pay for salaries, pay for flights, and some things, and some people are insisting, even for consultancy fee, even sometimes even in charging in certain fees in Nigeria, like school fees, right? Whether it's some American colleges or British colleges, they mark those things, mark it up in dollars, and the government play blind eyes. We can't certainly strengthen the dollars, the naira, by so doing, right? Certainly not this way.
Sometime in March, we had a situation occasioned by Dangote refinery halting crude sale of petroleum products in Naira. What followed was independent marketers immediately hiking the price of petroleum products. Now, that is some sort of play. I don't know what adjective to use to qualify that kind of play that has been occurring between Dangote and the marketers that lift from him and the rest of the independent marketers?
So the point I think Dangote's challenge actually is not really with those that patronize, because those that patronize Dangote is looking at the interest of the country, right? And that of the masses for two major reasons. You're a marketer, you know that Dangote's fuel is more sustainable, right? In fact, all of these things has been empirically proven. So some of those other fuels could finish like maybe depending on the number of liters, right? You know, maybe you would have finished twice a certain number of liters. If you buy 20 liters, you would have needed to put 40 liters. Wheels, the same person that bought from Dangote, will drive that 20 liters for the same distance that you cover, right? With your 40 liters. And that means that the volatility of that fuel, the sustainability is not good enough. So why will a marketer want to buy what the customers will not get revalued for their money, considering the high cost of fuel, if not for maybe some self-seeking interest, maybe if you are going to make more money, right? And I see that new policy of a government who once accepted a naira for crude to just at the last minute to turn at that agreement, it's suggestive of something fishy, right? It will mean that some stakeholders who are not favored by that policy would feel that come on, if we mark up this in dollars, then it will really be difficult for someone, a local producer, who will now have to look for forests to purchase from the same country, as against someone who, by the virtue of trading with international partners, will get the best rate for dollars and imports, right? Just to edge out local competitors. So some of those policies is actually meant to disenfranchise or a kind of place in a disadvantaged position some key players like Dangote.
Do you do you believe that reducing petrol prices is a sustainable strategy for economic stability? And what are the potential risks or downbacks that could rise from such move in the long term?
Well, I believe it's a progressive move, because one of the things inflation does, it reduces the purchasing power of citizens, right? And when you have like an economy that largely depends on oil, it means that once you raise the oil price, it will have like an all-encompassing impact on the prices of goods, on the prices of services, on even everything that has to do with the nation. So I think that such policies is encouraged, especially when you look at the way the government, raised the price of fuel and petrol and on all its associated products. Considering that as a nation, we crude, producing nation, we have the crude oil, so we should be able to have it in an affordable aspect. But for us as Nigerian, we are paying very high, and we just know that. If you cast your mind back to when fuel was 80 something naira, right? Not several years ago, like maybe some 11 years ago, and then maybe as at still around maybe 4 years ago, we could still be talking about like 200 and something, right? And all of a sudden we just see like rising, sporadically, and it's very impactful on the economy. As per whether there is any economic challenges of reducing the price of fuel, I don't think so, because such reduction will mean that businesses can be able to power their businesses more easily, depending on when government is, ready to fix electricity such that it's stable, right? That will also mean that the cost of transportation would be impacted greatly. What that will mean is that The cost of logistics for business people to move their product from markets to the end users would also be like from place of production to the marketplace would be cheaper, and that will also impact on the cost of the product. So it's a policy that it's encouraged as a way to stabilize the economy and also improve the standard of living for the common citizen.
Recently, a new GMD was appointed for the NNPCL, and he has already a lot in his desk to handle given the situation. Truth be told, it's always, it's clear really that the pricing of petrol by and large have a huge effect on the economy of the country. Currently, we do not have any running refinery, state-owned refinery, or do we, CEO?
Okay, so at the moment, yeah, we have the one of Port Harcourt is actually operating at a snail speed. Yes, the government claimed to have invested so much, but we're here to see it fully operationalized to its best output. So we are hopeful, but of course, oil is also refined in those places, but unfortunately, not to the capacity of those refineries.
Why I brought this up is that when we were expecting Dangote's refinery to come up running, we were hopeful that it was going to have a huge effect on what the pricing would look like. And when it happened, the reduction from what we had since May 29, 2023 is just minimal. If eventually we resuscitate, apart from Port Harcourt refinery, probably Warri or Kaduna refinery, do you foresee a further, a significant reduction in the petrol price?
Yeah, certainly. That's what is reasonably expected because the beautiful thing about refining your own product is you wouldn't have to import it. Because anytime you import, right, a lot of things begin to play out, the high cost of importation, logistics, and tariff is also applicable. Because those companies refining there, before they're able to move these products away, they have to pay a lot, to have that done. It's not one of the products that nations could trade under free trade zones, right? So a lot of monies, taxations, and form of tariff, it's actually involved. So by the time you check like all of the landing costs, all of the taxes, all of the things that has to be paid across border to have this delivered to the citizens, and in some cases even subsidy when the cost is too high and almost not affordable for the citizens. So government has to borrow to be able to subsidize it, which has been one of the things that destroyed the economy of Nigeria. So now we are rising to the challenge by having one of the men, I'm going to call him as one of the men that history will reckon as the man that built Nigeria, and that's Dangote. Coming up to have like a refinery that can do 650,000 barrels per day of crude oil. That capacity can supply all of the oil we need in Nigeria, all of the petrol and gas needs, and even across the entire West African coast and beyond. So that's lots of capacity, right? And now if you now have government also investing further into that, aside from the fact that it's going to be relatively very affordable, it's also going to impact on our currency, strengthening it, because we will now have the opportunity of selling refined products, which gives more money. Do you know, NG, that for every barrel of crude oil we sell in the crude form, we are losing about $800, right? For failing to refine it. And that's the beauty of being an economy that believes in refining and not one that sells its raw products almost for nothing.
Many thanks, CEO, for joining us on Signature Business this evening. Thank you.
Signature TV, news in your pocket.